Welcome to the Super Bowl week edition of Steel Scorpion Sports Fantasy Football Podcast. Coming at you live from San Diego, I'm Jeff Miller.
From San Jose, I'm Mark Huffman.
And Mark, this is the travel week, the dead week, the pre-week before the excitement of Super Bowl week. So obviously there aren't any games to speak of, unless you count the Pro Bowl, which I don't. And we're not going to talk about Canadian football or anything else, which I also believe is on hiatus. So let's stick to the real thing. But I do hear you may, contrary to my beliefs, have some gambling results for the week. Is that true?
I do. We've had gambling results for how many weeks in a row now? 18, 19, 20, 21, something like that. So we might as well keep the streak going because we will have gambling results next week as well. So just for fun. So Team Carter opened up as a 1.5 point favorite. Somehow there were enough degenerates out there that bet on the Pro Bowl and decided that Team Carter was much better, probably because Team Carter had Andrew Luck. It's the only reasonable conclusion I can draw there. And so Team Carter opened as 1.5 point favorites. They closed as 3-point favorites. They did not cover. In fact, they lost. Team Irvin won the game 32-28 for a combined total of 60 points, which came under the number. The total was 69, so came 9 full points under the over-under.
Amazing. So for Pro Bowls this year, that means that underdogs and under are the way to go?
It's 100% for 2015, yes.
That's good. Just good, clean fun right there. Great stats, Mark. I'm very proud of you for, one, knowing that the Pro Bowl was today, two, finding the betting lines for said Pro Bowl, and three, having the diligence to actually track the results. Congratulations.
Hey, weird, nothing is not thorough here.
You may be the only person in America that actually did something similar to that, so I guess congratulations. But be that as it may.
What? I think the real congratulations are for the fact that neither one of us had any action on the game itself. So.
True. And the congratulations go out to team, which team did you say won? Team Irvin? I already forgot. It was so riveting. I was so enthralled by the Pro Bowl, I can't even tell you. I think the captains you said were Irvin and Carter, but I didn't realize that Bruce Carter was actually allowed to be a captain, but whatever. Good for you, NFL.
Chris Carter.
Oh, Chris Carter, my bad.
And Michael Irvin, the playmaker. Yes, Irvin team won by 4. Matthew Stafford was the MVP of the game, and I will say I watched all of maybe 4 minutes in the first quarter, and there were boos on the first drive of the game because DeMarco Murray got a couple handoffs in a row, and the defense wasn't even really tackling him. Like, he would run, he would get past the line, and then the linebackers would be waiting there, and it was just kind of like a gang hug, and he didn't want to bring him down, and the crowd started booing. And I can't blame him. It's not even real football. At the same time, like, at least DeMarco Murray had the guts to be out there, because he's an unrestricted free agent. He's going to, hopefully sign a somewhat large contract, at least as far as running backs go. Other people, we saw Jeremy Maclin decide to not play, Roethlisberger decide to not play, not because they had injuries, just because they were angling for a contract and they didn't want to take the chance. So at least applaud the fact that he was out there, but yeah, there's not really any tackling going on in that game.
All right, but you said DeMarco Murray's going to sign a big free agent contract. Is that with the Colts?
It could be. It could be with the Cowboys, it could be with the Colts, it could be with the Vikings after Adrian Peterson goes to the Cowboys. It could be with the Raiders if they don't feel like Latavius Murray is the answer. So we'll see. That'll be one of our subplots of the offseason.
Excellent. But Mark, that gambling recap does lead me to something I did want to cover on this podcast, and that would be the always exciting Super Bowl prop bets. I believe there are 57 pages of prop bets on most websites, or you can find them on the Las Vegas Suns website. They have reprinted from one of the, I think, the Westgate Sportsbook. So I know, Mark, we promised the people out there that we would come to the table with a couple of good prop bets, things that we like. So why don't you lead us off and give me your first prop bet that you really feel strongly about?
Okay, so the coin toss, you can bet heads or tails, and then you can also bet will the team who wins the coin toss, or which team will win the coin toss, Patriots or Seahawks. And then from there you can also do, will the winner of the coin toss win the Super Bowl? I like to parlay those. I like to combine all three.
Mark.
So, what?
Those are what we refer to as the sucker bets.
My bad.
I guess you didn't get the memo that you're the sucker.
Just for the record, I want to go ahead and state this so that it's documented and verified, so that when this happens, and people, if you parlay these straight, like a 6-to-1 payout here. So my recommendation is bet that the coin toss will be a head, that the Patriots will win the coin toss, and that the team who wins the coin toss will not win the Super Bowl. So that's heads, Patriots, no. Parlay it for a nice 6-to-1 payout. So
wow,
there you go.
6-to-1. Whew.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I can hardly contain my
my
enthusiasm, but I assume you have better advice than parlaying 3 completely random facts.
I do. It does get better than that. So, I will save my top 3 for a little while. I'll discuss a couple of ones that I like, but then didn't make my top 3. So, Tom Brady versus Russell Wilson passing yards. It's Brady minus 40.5. I can see Brady throwing for about 280, maybe more. I don't see Russell Wilson getting to 240. Russell Wilson, the more of the game manager type is going to run, Russell Wilson may get, 40 to 50 rushing yards. I like Brady minus 40.5. And then Brady completions, you can actually bet on the specific number of completions he will have, and it goes one by one. It's not even a range. Like for passing yards, they do it in chunks of basically they break down to like 20 yards, 181 to 200, 201 to 220, etc. For completions, it's one by one. But I was looking at it. If you bet in a 22 to 28 range, and it falls anywhere in there, you'll still make a profit. Because 22, 23, 24 are all 8-1. 25 is 8-1. And then 26 and 27 are 10-1. 28 is 12-1. I feel like it'll probably be somewhere in that range, the 22 to 28 range. And then it also has the added bonus of it makes the fourth quarter interesting for you. So depending on, if he comes into the fourth quarter with, 18, 19, 20, something like that, or if he's a little bit higher in that range, then you're hoping that the Patriots are ahead and that they're running the ball and that he's not completing any passes. But I kind of like that one. Not for a ton of action, just has potential payout there. And one more that I like is, and this is one that I put a little bit of action last year. It didn't pay off, but it's fun to do. The number of different players with a pass attempt, and over 2.5 has a plus 220 payout. Now, you're getting 2 automatically, obviously. Brady's going to have a pass attempt. Russell Wilson's going to have a pass attempt. Now, we saw in the Patriots-Ravens game, Julian Edelman had a pass attempt. We saw last week in the Seahawks-Packers game, the punter John Ryan had a pass attempt. And so, there's a chance for a trick play here or there with the payout of 220, but it's obviously not a sure thing. I wouldn't recommend going very big on it, but it's just something a little bit fun, a little bit of action on it, so that during the game you're hoping that there's some kind of trick play where you get a third player that has a pass attempt. And of course, we're not rooting for anyone to get injured, but if either one of them were to even get injured for one player where they had to come out, you have a backup in there, and granted, he might not actually have a pass attempt, the backup might come in and just hand the ball off, but at least for that one play, you're going to be, standing up and rooting like hell that he throws the ball. So those are kind of 3 fun ones that I like. But we'll hear some of yours before we get to my top 3.
All right, well, similar vein to what you said there is one that I like to do, not for a lot of money, but it's always fun. It's the first pass attempt. So for Russell Wilson, the first pass attempt, you can say whether it's going to be complete, incomplete, interception, or touchdown. Now, obviously, interception is a really big number. But I'm saying, when I look at it, I like Russell Wilson's first pass being incomplete and getting plus 150. Again, don't put a lot of money on this, but similar to your a couple of years there, Mark, it does give you that first time the Seahawks have the ball, you're kind of like, man, I hope he drops back and just throws a bomb and it's just overthrown. Then you're happy. And then they're always the ones with the yardage comparisons, as you said. The more rushing yardage one was interesting to me with LeGarrette Blount and Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch has been blowing up in the playoffs, and down the stretch he was as well. Blount obviously had a huge game against the Colts, but the week before, when he played the Ravens, I believe he had like 7 yards. So Lynch is a 21.5 yard favorite over Blount. So I started looking at that. The Patriots are a pretty good run defense, so you're looking at Lynch maybe gets in the 80-90 range in just about every game. So do you think Blunt's getting over 60? I would say he does. So taking the 21.5 probably isn't bad because the Seahawks aren't so great on defense that they shut running backs down completely. So it might be worth something small as well. Now it is minus 110, so it's not terribly great payout.
I like that one. I think Blunt has a real good chance of staying within 21.5 yards of Lynch.
Yeah, I do too. And again, it's not one of those that you're going to make millions off of unless you want to put a ton of money down. But those are the couple I saw that didn't make my top 3. So now, without further ado, Mark, the drum roll is going. Give me your top 3.
All right. I have 2 more quick ones I did before I get my top 3, if I can hold people's suspense as long as possible. One of them is Super Bowl MVP. Now, I kind of, and we'll save our predictions for later, though that's going to maybe give away which team I'm thinking is going to win. But for Super Bowl MVP, if you think the Seahawks are going to win, it's most likely going to come down to either the quarterback or Marshawn Lynch if he has a big game. We see the quarterback usually get it, and I know last year we had the defensive guy get it. So there's a chance, of course. But Wilson is plus 300, and Lynch is plus 450. So the fact that they're both over 2 to 1, obviously, means that you can put money on both of them, and that if either one of them wins, you still make a profit. Now, of course, if the Seahawks lose, or if Richard Sherman has 2 pick sixes or something like that, then you're not going to get the payout on that. But I do like that one. Another one I like is for the Super Bowl. Now, usually for the team score in the first X minutes of a game, usually it's either around 5.5 or 6, and that's the only one if you're going to even see that prop. For the Super Bowl, on the side that I'm looking at, you can bet that for the first 5.5 minutes, the first 6 minutes, the first 6.5 minutes, the first 7 minutes, and the first 7.5 minutes. So, of course, the payouts vary. If you think it's going to be scored in the first 5.5 minutes, payout is plus 110 if you say yes. If you go all the way 2 minutes later and say, well, either team scored in the first 7.5 minutes of the game, then the yes payout is minus 150. Now, the payout's not great at negative 150, but I do like the chances of either team scoring in the first 7.5 minutes. What do you think about that one?
First 7.5 minutes, probably agree with you. The first 5.5, I would probably disagree, because here's my logic. The Patriots, if they win the coin toss, will defer, because they love to get the ball to start the second half. Seattle's offense isn't explosive. It's more of a rushing attack. So a quick strike is probably unlikely, and both defenses are pretty good. So it takes you a little while to work yourself into the game. Although I guess if you'd bet that last year, the first score was about 7 seconds into the game?
Yep.
And you would have thought, hey, Denver got the ball first. There could be a quick score. You just didn't expect it to be on the first play and it'd be a safety over the head of Peyton Manning. But hey, I digress. I think the first 7.5 is probably fair, because even if Seattle gets the ball first, doesn't do much, they punt, Brady gets the ball, somewhere in there, somebody's going to get in field goal range in the first half of the quarter. Maybe get a touchdown. But yeah, I like that.
Okay. So now we will get to my top 3, and I haven't ranked them in any particular order, so here we go. One of my top 3 is another one of those ones similar to, I mentioned Brady versus Wilson passing yards. You mentioned Blunt versus Lynch rushing yards. This is the receiving category. This one is Julian Edelman versus Luke Wilson. So you have a wide receiver versus a tight end. And Edelman, in particular, when you're given 29.5. I still like Edelman in this one. He's a wide receiver. The Patriots are going to be throwing a fair amount. Like I said earlier, I can see Brady getting 280 passing yards or more. I can easily see Edelman getting, at least 60, 70 yards. Luke Wilson, he's a nice red zone threat. Like, Luke Wilson can get 2 touchdowns and only have 20 yards in the entire game. But that's entirely feasible. So I really like that one. Edelman only having to get 30 yards more than Luke Wilson. And, I looked at the box score for the last 6 or 8 weeks. I don't think Luke Wilson was more than 30 receiving yards maybe once. So, pretty good chances there. Another one that I like is Garrett Blunt to score a TD. I'm not saying first TD of the game, not even saying the Patriots first TD of the game. I'm saying score any TD at all in the game. He's a big red zone threat. If they get down to within the 5-yard line, he's a good blind back. So I think it's a pretty good chance of scoring, and it's only negative 105. So I like that one. I think it's a pretty good chance of scoring a TD. It's a pretty good payout. The third one I like is, will the game be tied at any point after 0-0? And yes is negative 115. So you get a little bit of extra juice in there. But for a game that is fairly evenly matched, and we've seen the point spreads, the Seahawks opened as a short favorite. Now the Patriots are a short favorite. By the time we get to kickoff, who knows? It could be 1 point, half a point, could even be a pick 'em. This is a fairly even matchup. You could easily see this game, 3-3, 7-7, 10-10, 13-13. Maybe it doesn't even happen until the third quarter. Maybe it ends up being, 24-24 at some point in the third or something. But you can easily see this game being tied at some point after 0-0. Obviously, if you bet on this, you're going to, you hope that you win this bet in the first quarter. One team scores, and the other team comes back and matches it, and you're sitting pretty. You don't even have to worry about it the rest of the game. So those are 3 of my favorites that I think have good chances and good payouts. What do you think of those? And then what are your favorites?
Well, as you'll note quickly as I go through my top 3, that I really like at least one of yours. I get a lot more yards than a tight end, especially a tight end that's more of a red zone threat. So his catches, even when he gets them, are 5 yards. So, yeah, I don't mind yours. Especially the will LeGarrette Blount score a TD. That's one of my top 3.
Yeah.
So I think you and I are going to definitely both have to place a theoretical wager on that, because that would be fun for us to be sitting on the same theoretical proposition, correct?
Yeah, of course.
But I like you, thought, wow, he's a great red zone threat, and he's going to get touches anytime they get inside the 10, and, it just seems likely that at some point, if the Patriots are going to score points, he probably is getting one of them. So I like that. Another one I liked was rushing yards for Tom Brady, over or under 1.5. I said I'll take the over for the plus 135. Tom Brady does QB sneaks. He does that hurry-up thing. And anytime he does that, he gets a yard or 2. I just like, and a scramble, maybe he scrambles for a couple yards. All I need are 2 yards here. So I'm going to go with Tom Brady getting more than 1.5 yards. And then finally, I just love to bet this every year. This year, the payout was still good, so I'm happy with that. But a special teams or defensive touchdown being scored, yes, plus 155. With these teams, with good defenses, with special teams play that they both, focus on, I like the chances of somebody, especially on the defensive side more than the special team side, causing a jarring hit to the quarterback, making a fumble that's returned, or getting a pick 6. So I like to play that one. Thoughts?
Yeah, that sounds good. That's a decent payout for a defensive or special team return, especially with two pretty good defenses in this game. And then, I like the Brady one too. I hadn't come across that one yet. 1.5 yards is a really low hurdle. You would hate, though, of course, for him to have, 3 rushing yards, and then they're ahead late in the fourth. They're able to just kill the clock, and they take 3 neo bounds that take them down from 3 yards to 1 yard or something like that. That would just be excruciatingly painful.
Yes.
But, yeah, I do like that one, though.
And it could happen, too. So that's why you have to hope that he scrambles for like 8 yards early in the game. Because then even if he gets a couple kneel downs at the half and at the end of the game, you're okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And it appears both of us like LeGarrette Blount enough to score a TD that we'll have a little common interest in the game.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. You know, I gotta figure the Patriots going to score 3, maybe 4 touchdowns in this game. At least one of them is likely to be a rushing touchdown. And if you tell me there's going to be a rushing touchdown, I think it's most likely going to be Blount. Sure, with the Patriots, it could literally be anyone, the way that Belichick sub running backs in and out. So, I mean, for all we know, he might have re-signed Juan Smaroni off the street this week and give him the rushing touchdown. I wouldn't put it past him, but I'll take my chances with Blount.
I think a retired Corey Dillon is available.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because if Blunt's going to score, that means the Patriots are running the ball, so they're probably taking the air out of the ball and moving it towards the goal line, you know, try to deflate the Seahawks spirit. Is that what you expect to happen?
I see what you did there.
You see what I did there?
I see what you did there. You know, it's very similar to what Andrew Luck did in his season-ending press conference with the Indianapolis media. He mentioned that he somehow used the word. He said that it was very deflated after the loss or something like that. And
it's a very deflating loss, I agree. And, you know,
yes.
And it stinks because the Patriots do take the air right out of the ball when they run the ball, like, down your throat. So,
yeah,
good for me. Yay. I think that's about all that we need to speak on deflate-gate, don't you? I think it's been covered ad nauseum in the media. The only developments were that Belichick had a press conference and said, I don't know anything about it. And then Brady had a press conference after Belichick, better ask Tom. That was the bus, you know, he got the tire tread off of him, and then he stood up and said, I don't cheat. I wouldn't cheat. But it's funny because everybody says, well, we don't understand. I mean, it's atmospheric pressure and this and that. It's funny that the Colts balls weren't 11 of 12 underinflated, and yet they were in the same weather, I would assume, as the Patriots balls. Isn't that funny, Mark?
It's very funny. It's very confusing. And then, you know, Belichick, of course, had to have a second press conference on yesterday. We're recording this on a Sunday night, so Saturday he had a press conference where he pretty much doubled down and dared anyone to ever question Bill Belichick. How dare you? So we'll see what happens. If the NFL is, you know, doing their investigation, I don't think we're going to get any kind of results or penalties. I think before the Super Bowl, they're probably hoping that it goes away. Although, of course, Tuesday is media day, so you got to figure it's going to, you know, be a large percentage of the questions that get devoted to it. But yeah, I think as far as we're concerned, we'll just kind of wait until the judgment comes out before we discuss it anymore.
Perfect. Although I have to disagree with you. I don't think the NFL wants it to go away. Last week, we had CNN, Good Morning America, Fox Sports or Fox News, all running stories on Deflategate and the NFL. I have to believe that even though it's the Super Bowl and it's two good teams, this could have done nothing but help ratings, because more people that aren't diehard football fans, the casual fans, are like, what happened? Cheaters? What? And now they'll tune in. Likely they would have tuned in anyway. The Super Bowl tends to get a pretty good number. But, yeah, I think this does drum up interest, and no publicity is bad publicity, right?
I don't know. I mean, when you think it's a pretty good number, we're talking 110 million people usually around there. And it was going to get that anyway. If anything, it may have driven the number up from 110.3 to 110.7 or something like that. I mean, it's not. The advertisers are already locked in. They've already paid their, you know, they've already sold out other advertisers.
Yes, but
that doesn't even matter for that.
It matters for next year. They set the rates off of this year's ratings. So any extra 0.1 billion people or whatever it is that they're going to get to watch this, they'll be happy.
Yeah.
But enough about that for us. So on to bigger and better things. we've been teasing this for a couple weeks, Mark, and now we're going to have to pay off. This Saturday, prior to the Super Bowl, will be the NFL's Gala, the event that now is the awards presentation the night before the Super Bowl. So I believe they'll announce the Hall of Fame class, but also give away the awards from the 2014 season. And you and I decided, well, since we have the time, why don't we predict who these award winners are going to be? And why don't we just start with, and keep it short, we'll just go and cover MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Coach of the Year. I know you particularly wanted to go for the Defensive Rookie of the Year and really break down 2 versus 3 techniques on the defensive line, but I don't know quite enough about that to say anything that would really argue a point against you, so I'll just accept that some guy on the defensive side of the ball that's a rookie will win Defensive Rookie of the Year. That's my prediction.
I will say that I will be shocked if it's not Aaron Donald, C.J. Mosley, or Khalil Mack. If you had a way to bet there'll be one of those 3, then put your mortgage down. It will be one of those 3.
Yeah, I agree. I've heard those names, but again, the difference, especially Aaron Donald, defensive lineman for St. Louis, it's really difficult for me to say, wow, he was the Rookie of the Year. One, I didn't watch many St. Louis games, and 2, he's an interior lineman on the defensive line. Didn't really notice that much. At least Khalil Mack, he makes some plays. He tries to get to the quarterback, so you see him a little more. But yeah, let's ignore Defensive Rookie of the Year. We'll stick with MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Coach of the Year. So why don't you lead us off on one of those categories, the category of your choosing.
I will choose Rookie of the Year. So I think a runner-up will be Jeremy Hill. He had a pretty good season, especially since the first, probably 5 or 6 weeks of the season. He didn't do a whole lot. Maybe averaged, 5 or 6 carries a game, something like that. He was going to change the pace back. And Bernard was clearly the starter. But then Bernard got injured. And Bernard missed a few games. And while he was out, Hill took full advantage of the opportunity. He had some games, I think at least 2 games, we had over 100 yards. And even when Bernard came back, it was, okay, Jeremy Hill is now our starter. And Bernard, you're a third down back, and you're a better pass catcher out of the backfield, so we'll still mix you in. But Jeremy Hill was the starter. He had a really good season, had really good yards per carry, had some touchdowns, decent amount of yards, but clearly the Offensive Rookie of the Year has to be Odell Beckham Jr. It's even crazier when you consider the fact that he pretty much missed all of training camp, and he missed the first 4 games of the season. Nevertheless, he still had a ton of receptions, I think 90, over 1,000 yards, and quite a few touchdowns as well, not to mention some of the most acrobatic catches you've ever seen. So he is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the NFL for the next dozen years or so, and I'll be quite shocked if he's not named Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Not surprisingly, I also picked ODB Jr. to be the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Like you, I think the big coming out party against the Cowboys and some of the other big games cemented him in the public's mind and in the voters' minds. And that he'll ride that sentiment because Hill's a nice player, but he played for Cincinnati, kind of a blah team, and he didn't drum up excitement. In fact, I'm not even sure Hill will finish second. I think Kelvin Benjamin from Carolina might. He had a lot of touchdowns, a lot of receptions, had a great season. But I think it's going to be ODB Jr., and I don't think there's any way they take it away from him. So with that, I'm going to transition us, and I'm going to go to the MVP. I'm afraid you and I will probably agree on this, but I'm going to predict that Aaron Rodgers gets the MVP. Now, I'm not saying that would be necessarily who I would vote for, but I'm saying that is who I believe will win the award. Rodgers did have a good year. He did lead the Packers to the number 2 seed over in the NFC. He pretty much, after the RELAX press conference, was the best quarterback in football for a bit of a stretch there, probably 8 to 10 weeks. The calf at the end of the year did limit him a bit. And the only reason I say he was probably the best quarterback is he didn't have the turnovers Andrew Luck did. So even though Luck was probably outproducing him with yards, I think Aaron Rodgers, the 0 interceptions at Lambeau, the going undefeated at home, it's all going to add up to Aaron Rodgers getting the MVP. And I think Second, surprisingly, won't even be someone like Andrew Luck. It'll be maybe DeMarco Murray, maybe Tony Romo, or maybe J.J. Watt.
Okay. For my prediction, I'm just going to win the MVP. I am going to predict the quarterback that had just shy of 4,400 passing yards. He had 38 touchdowns against just 5 interceptions. He finished with the second highest rating, QB rating, and the second highest yards per attempt of any quarterback. And it so happens it's the same quarterback that you just mentioned. It's Aaron Rodgers. He was the number 2 seed. They went 12-4, and he had the whole, like you mentioned, the relax moment where they started out 1-2. He told the fans to calm down. They went 11-2 after that. And he had kind of this MVP moment in Week 17 when he was in one of the national games against the Lions. He needed to win in order to get a bye. He had the injury where he kind of left the field for a little while and then came back and led them to the win. So I think that'll play a role in voters' minds. As far as second place, it's probably actually going to be J.J. Watt. There was actually a large groundswell of support for J.J. Watt to be MVP. I personally don't agree with that, and not because he's a defensive player. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with pitchers in baseball getting MVP awards. I'm okay with defensive players in football getting MVP awards. But your team went 9-7. You didn't make the playoffs. Discussion over. I don't care if they would have been 3-13 without you, and they were 9-7 with you. You still didn't get them in the playoffs. So no matter how valuable you weren't valuable enough to play in the postseason. So as far as I'm concerned, discussion over.
I agree, and that's the reason I wouldn't have put J.J. Watt as the MVP. The Romo and Murray issue, I mean, Murray had such a great year running the ball, and it was probably the reason the Cowboys were able to get back in the playoffs and had a great year. But they didn't do as well as the Packers, and Rodgers has everything, as you said. He has all the stats. He has the moments. I think it's got to be Aaron Rodgers. So why don't you then lead us through our third and final award that we're going to cover, Coach of the Year.
Coach of the Year, okay, I'm going to discuss 2 candidates because if I'm predicting who I think is going to win, I think it's probably going to be Bruce Arians. They went 11-5, but they were, I think 9-1 at one point or 7-1. They were 9-1 actually. But then Carson Palmer went down. They struggled. Obviously, they had Drew Stanton, but then he went down. They were playing with William Lindley. Andre Ellington was out. Fitzgerald actually missed a game or 2 for the first time in his career, maybe. He's basically never missed his time. And so it seems like he's going to get the award. But I would argue that it should actually be Jason Garrett. The Cardinals went 10-6 last year, 11-5 this year. People thought they were probably going to be a playoff team this year. They improved by 1 win. And if, maybe you do or do not want to use this as kind of a metric, but a lot of times Coach of the Year is based off of how you did versus expectations. The Cardinals over-under in Vegas was 9.5. They got 11. The Cowboys over-under in Vegas was 7.5. They finished with 12 wins. Not only was it over-under 7.5, but a lot of people were saying to take the under. They thought they were going to have one of the worst defenses of all time. They would be, trying to play catch-up in every single game. They went 12-4. They were undefeated at home. And they had a really good season. Way better than anyone had expected. So I'm going to predict Arians. But if I had a vote, I'd go Jason Garrett.
Interesting, because what I had here was Arians over Garrett. And I had the exact same thoughts as you. I think Arians is going to get it. One, people like him. He's a nice character for the NFL to have. And he did piece together a playoff team with, String and Spackle after he loses Carson Palmer and he loses his second quarterback in Stanton. So, yeah, definitely I think he's probably got the sentiment for it. And he could be a second-time winner because he did win when he was the interim coach for the Colts. So that would be an interesting thing for a Coach of the Year to pop up on 2 different teams within, 3 years? Pretty impressive. But like you, I thought Garrett really deserves a lot of consideration. he did turn that team from 8-8, 8-8, 8-8 into 12-4. And he did it by corralling all the rigmarole that goes around the Cowboys, which you have to figure is a lot harder to do. He has Jerry Jones in his ear. Arians has some owner in his ear that we don't know of, and probably has a lot more control, whereas Jason Garrett has all the pressure of being the Cowboys coach on him. So it was impressive what he did. I'll even throw a third candidate out there for you. I don't think he has any shot at winning, but probably comes in third. Jim Caldwell took the Lions, who had all that talent, should have been a playoff team for a few years in a row, couldn't get it done. Caldwell comes in, steadies things, gets them into the playoffs. I think there's something to be said for that. He should at least be, given a pat on the back. I do think that in the playoffs we saw what's going to cause Jim Caldwell nothing but problems in Detroit is that he's not an aggressive coach at all. He is ultra conservative, and I think at the end of the day that's going to end up not working in his favor. But this year, hey, he got him into the playoffs, so good job, Jim Caldwell.
The other crazy thing for Arians is, you mentioned that he won 2 years ago in the 2012 season with the Colts. Last year he finished second behind, I'm pretty sure Ron Rivera of the Panthers won last year when they had their surprise playoff season. And then if he wins this year, Arians would go first, second, first in 3 consecutive years, which would be pretty darn impressive.
True. And I think we were both saying that's what's going to happen. Just to touch on it quickly, Defensive Player of the Year, I think we both agree. J.J. Watt's probably going to run away with that.
Probably even unanimous, yeah.
Could be unanimous. I do feel bad because Houston and Kansas City had, 22 sacks? A great year.
Yeah.
And he may not even get a vote for Defensive Player of the Year. That's rough.
That is rough.
All right, well, we will follow up next week and determine how our predictions went. But since we agreed on everything, I think we're probably going to both be correct on all 3.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, well, that will take us to the first of our weekly segments, Mark. It's the always popular On the Spot. One of us asks the other 3 questions, unprepared for, and you just fire from the hip. And this week I get to ask you the questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
I am.
You don't sound ready. This is kind of worrisome to me. I know this is a big spot for you. On the spot.
Okay. I'm ready.
All right. Question 1. What do you think John Fox and the Bears will do with Jay Cutler?
Yeah, it was pretty funny that he called him Jake a couple times at his press conference. That's probably not the best sign in the world. I think they'll probably keep him unless they can find a willing trade partner. As far as willing trade partners go, I'd have to think the only 2 possibilities are maybe Buffalo, because they don't feel that E.J. Manuel is the answer, and they don't have a first-round draft pick, so they might get desperate enough to trade for Jay Cutler. And then the more, I think it's more talked about, it's probably a better fit since he played college ball at Vanderbilt, to their national place, the Titans. But they are claiming that they like Mettenberger as the answer, and they also have the number 2 pick. So if they like Mettenberger, then they don't need Cutler, or if they decide they don't like Mettenberger, they can use the number 2 pick to take either Mariota or Winston. So I think it's likely that we're going to see Cutler stay in Chicago, and probably because of his contract. They certainly can't cut him. It'd be much too big of a hit to their cap. So I think they'll keep him and try to make the best of a not-so-great situation.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, sports fans. Jay Cutler will be the quarterback for the Chicago Bears next year. Are you saying he'll be the starting QB?
Yeah, if he's there. I mean, who else do they have? Jake Austin? I mean, that didn't actually go very well. So I think they'll probably take a quarterback. Maybe they might take a, 3rd or 4th round quarterback and see if they can, find a diamond in the rough or develop him. But I would say odds are good that he is their week 1 starting QB.
All right, so Chicago fans, we're sorry. For the rest of you, you heard Mark's prediction. Jay Cutler will be starting under center for John Fox's Chicago Bears. All right, Mark, question number 2. If you were a team in the NFL drafting somewhere, say, between 5 and 10 in this upcoming draft, and you did not have a franchise quarterback, what would you give up to move up to get a Mariota or a Winston?
Good question. Well, it would depend on of course, would have to scout the crap out of Winston and Mariota, look at all of their game films, not just this year, but last year as well. Try to get a good sample size of about 25 different games I can look at, determine do I think they're the answer, and not just the short-term answer, but do I think this guy could be my franchise QB for the next dozen years? And then, of course, you have to do the mental aspect as well, and both of them have questions. There's questions about Mariota, like, is he too nice? Is he willing to take over the team? Is he willing to tell people, hey, you need to be in this spot, like, how Peyton Manning does to his wide receivers, and correct them and say, run the right route, and get on the pace, and he's willing, can he, take over a huddle and have the, just have the enthusiasm and the charisma in order to get his teammates to follow him. So I think that is a real question. You have to check that out. For Winston, obviously, there's a whole slew of maturity-related questions. Is this guy worth the investment? Is he going to be in jail in a couple of years if we draft him? There's a fairly big risk there. So I personally, with what I've seen from Winston, would probably not trade up to get him because I don't think it's worth the risk. And even if you're sitting there at the 1 or 2 spot, it's still a huge risk to use that pick on someone that might get in serious legal trouble within a couple of years. Compound that with having to trade to get up there and give up future picks. Not worth it. For Mariota, if you have the offense that you think you'd be able to fit well in your scheme, and I'm in the 5 to 10 range, and I want to trade it to get him, and I've done all my homework and feel that he is the answer, then you have to look at the value chart that Jimmy Johnson created many years ago, point system, and of course, if you're hitting for franchise QB, you might have to give up a little bit more than the chart says. If you think this guy's your answer and the other team knows they have leverage, so they don't need a QB. But, whatever the chart says, if you have to give them obviously if you move them from, let's say 7 to number 2, you probably still have to give you your first rounder for next year, and then maybe your third rounder for this year, something like that. But I would largely base it around the point chart.
Well, don't forget Washington traded from 6 to 2, right, to get RG3, and I believe they had to give up 3 number ones. Well, obviously that year's number 1, and then the following 2 years number ones.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy, especially in retrospect. And you'd have to think that they certainly regret doing that now. Even at the time, I thought that was kind of a stiff penalty or a stiff price to pay. They say 3 number ones, so that's kind of misleading. Obviously, you're swapping spots in that next year, but still 2 number ones after that. I don't know that I'd be willing to do that, especially with the RG3 situation so fresh in everyone's mind. But, if I'm moving up 7 to 2, I'd be willing to give up next year's first. And like I said, maybe a third this year, maybe not another third next year or something like that. But I would not want to give up my next 2 firsts.
All right. Well said. And the final on the spot, Mark. It's a little early, but who's the top pick in the 2015 fantasy football redrafts that will be going on, say, in August of this year?
2015 fantasy redrafts. Well, there will any quarterbacks. You should not be taking quarterbacks number 1 overall anyway, though there were probably some leagues this year where Peyton Manning was number 1 based off of his 2013 stats, and you saw how that went. You took him first overall, you probably weren't satisfied, especially due to well in the second half of the season when you were trying to make the playoffs and/or be in the playoffs. It's becoming more of a wide receiver league, but at the same time, I don't think there's any wide receivers that have taken number 1. So we landed on running back, and obviously DeMarco Murray had a huge year this year, but he had so many carries. He had almost 400 carries. He had 392, which was 80 carries more than the next highest running back. And then he had another 50 or so receptions on top of that. And then he had 2 playoff games as well. So I think he's going to be in for a huge crash of a year next year. To me, the clear number one at this point for next year has to be Le'Veon Bell. He's got the production, he gets tons of yards on the ground, and they use him in the passing game. He had a lot of receptions as well, and he didn't have very many bad games this year. Like, if you look at games where running backs had fantasy points of, I think barrier of 10 or 15 fantasy points or more, he did that in, I think, every game but one. So he's consistent, great in the run game and great in the pass game. I think it would have to be Bell.
I agree. I think Bell is the way to go. And also, we don't know where Murray will be. Probably Dallas, but there's a chance he ends up somewhere else. And let's say, you mentioned earlier, he ends up with the Raiders. Well, his value takes a huge nosedive all of a sudden. So there is that factor that we need to wait to see play out. Also, maybe Dallas announces they're going to cut his carries in half to save him. Well, that would also impact his value. I think Bell is the way to go. So good call on that one, Mark. And that is that's on the spot. 3 questions, 3 answers, and we got through it. You survived another week. Next week you could ask me questions. We'll see if I can do just as well.
All right.
Okay, well, that'll bring us to our second weekly segment. It's the off-imitated, never duplicated, everyone's favorite, Hef's Hate. So what do you hate, Mark?
All right. Since a large portion of this week's podcast was focused on prop bets, my Hef's Hate this week is for prop bets, but a specific kind of prop bet. I hate the gray area prop bets, or ones where I have to kind of keep track during the telecast to see if I've won or not, because I want to know how am I doing versus this prop. So, for example, last year there was a prop around how many times will Peyton Manning say Omaha during the game. This year, there's actually a prop on how many times will you hear the word, quote-unquote, deflated balls during the game. I don't want to have to track and have a little piece of paper and a pen and, I think I heard him say that. And then the gray area of, did he said deflated footballs. Does that count as deflated balls? I don't know. I just want to be able to look at the box score, pull up my phone, pull up my computer, some of the ones that we talked about, will the game be tied at any point after 0-0, yardage-wise from one player to another. I can look at the box score. I can see that in 2 seconds and know how I'm doing versus having to keep track. Oh, pause, rewind. Oh, did he say what? No. Not worth it. Not worth the trouble. Can you imagine the gray area of the sports book? They get to decide if he said the proper term or not, or how many times. No. Nothing to do with that. So that is my half-say for this week.
That's a very good hate, although I do have a question. So some of those I get, like you said, whether they say deflated ball or deflated football, gray area. But what about something like how long the national anthem is? Are you okay with that bet? Because it says, is it going to be over under 2 minutes and 2 seconds? That's something you can time, right?
You can. I mean, that is more acceptable to me than the one of how many times they say something. The other ones, examples of ones I don't like is they have will Katy Perry come out wearing, what color shirt or whatever, and will she be wearing, pants or a skirt or what? I don't want to deal with that. If you're betting on that, then I don't think you're watching the Super Bowl for the right reason.
Well, I will say, if you're betting on that, hopefully you know someone in Los Angeles that's in her wardrobe department.
That's the other thing I don't like about those. They seem very fixable. It seems like, if you know someone who knows someone, and you know what song she's going to sing first or what she's going to come out wearing, then, I don't know, it just seems like, how can you bet on something that one person has complete control over?
By the way, Mark, I know someone that knows someone. We'll talk later.
All right. Sweet.
Get ready to bet the mortgage. All right. Well, that was a good Hef's Hate because I agree. I think the gray areas are pretty funny. But again, that's part of the 58 pages of prop bets that you can find anywhere. And they'll let you bet on just about anything these days. It's pretty crazy. So good Hef's Hate for the week. I'm glad to see your anger is ratcheting up just in time for the Super Bowl. I'm I am assured that next week's will be amazing.
Oh, it'll be good.
That'll take us from the Hef's Hate to Miller's Minute. Now, I wanted to start off by saying I believe the Screen Actors Guild Awards were tonight, Sunday, and as I understand it, that's the actors nominating other people and voting on who the best actors are. So would that kind of be like, instead of the writers deciding who the MVP is, like the players voting on that and things like that? It seems kind of silly to me. We actually have award shows where people, real critics, decide who the best one is, like the Oscars. So the SAG, pretty funny to me. That's more of a Miller's hate. I stole your thunder. I'm sorry, Hef. But what I really wanted to touch on this week, and it's something I've seen a lot more of, and Mark, I'm going to have to bring you into the mainstream here, it's the trend of American youth. When you and I were kids, if you went to an amusement park, if you went to the mall, if you were out in public, kids had baseball caps on with the local baseball team, or just a baseball team in general, or a baseball jersey, and football jerseys as well. Well, I will tell you, having been at Disneyland recently, and having been out and about in San Diego over the last few weeks doing things on weekends that take me to where people are, I will say that the number 2 worn apparel in the United States for youth right now is soccer gear. Football, NFL football is still number 1, but football is clearly number 2. And that should be a clear warning shot to baseball. I can't tell you how many Messi and Ronaldo and just plain Barcelona or even U.S. national team jerseys I see when I'm at Disneyland. But you know what I don't see? I don't see Cubs jerseys, or very few Dodgers or Giants, definitely not Mariners, or any of the, even Yankees and Red Sox. You just don't see baseball gear. You see NFL gear, and you see soccer gear, but you don't see baseball. So baseball, I'd be really worried if I were you, because clearly the youth of America is moving towards watching soccer, and sure, they're like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 right now, but in 10 years they're going to be the demographic you wanted, and they're never going to have watched baseball. They don't care about baseball. So my minute for pop culture, Mark, is the phenomena of soccer in the youth of America clearly becoming the number 2 sport, and I think that's going to continue over the next 20 or 30 years, and soccer is going to continue to grow in our country.
It is a good one, and it's very topical because Rob Manfred Jr. just took over as the new baseball commissioner as of today from Bud Selig, who I think has been commissioner for the last 73 years, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like he's been there forever.
You're mistaken.
But he issues a letter. His first day on the job, he issued a letter. It was like 6 or 7 paragraphs or so. I read the letter. It was good. And I will say that about half of his letter, if not more, specifically focused on just what you said. And he talked about wanting to reconnect with the youth of America. And baseball is a game that gets passed down from generation to generation. And we need a new generation of people to fall in love with baseball and pass it on to their kids. And we need to reconnect with the Little League baseball, and we need to reconnect with inner city baseball. And so I will say he is very, very aware of what you just mentioned. But Selig was probably, asleep at the wheel and not really caring anymore, because he just, they kept him in the position for too long. But we could see the new guy come in and revitalize baseball, but we'll see.
Well, clearly he is at least aware of the problem, because it is going to be an interesting battle for them, because more kids are playing soccer. Youth soccer actually is the number 1 youth played sports in the United States. Now, granted, that's because you have a number of kids, 12 or so on a team, and you have many teams at all different age levels. Where baseball's a little harder to play. You have to have the equipment and other things. It's not just a ball, similar to basketball. Soccer is, where you just need a ball and a place to play. Baseball, you need equipment and their rules and bases and everything else. So, but it's good to see that he at least is aware that there's an issue, because baseball is clearly going to fall behind other sports. Bud Selig definitely drove that from the public's consciousness as the American pastime to second, soon third, maybe fourth in our sports consciousness. So, excellent job, Bud Selig. And Mark, that wraps up all of our segments for the week, and it leads us with only one thing left to do. That is make our Super Bowl predictions. So, without further ado, Super Bowl 49, Mark. The Patriots, the Seahawks, Glendale, Arizona, the University of Phoenix Stadium. This Sunday. The ball's kicked. What is the outcome?
I think we're in for a pretty good Super Bowl. I think we actually do have two pretty evenly matched teams. As I said before, which is why I like that prop of will the game be tied at any point after 0-0. I think we're going to see kind of a back and forth game. I think it'll be fairly low scoring in the first half. As teams kind of, test each other out, I think we could be looking maybe as low as like 10-7 at halftime, something like that. I think the scoring will pick up in the second half. I think late in the fourth quarter, the Seahawks will be ahead 31-27. The Patriots, down by 4, are driving. They know they can't take a field goal. They have to get a touchdown. And with less than a minute left in the game, Brady is going for that touchdown. He passes into the end zone. Richard Sherman cuts in, intercepts the ball, returns it a few yards, goes down, takes a knee, knows that the game is over. He then, of course, being Richard Sherman, being the attention whore that he is, keeps the ball, goes over to the sideline, tries to make a show of testing the ball, testing the air pressure, as he intercepted the ball. He wants to check it. And of course, after the game is over, since he intercepted Brady at the end of the game, he, of course, has to go find him on the field to say, "You mad, bro?" That's my prediction.
Well, I don't know that any of that end point will actually happen, but very nice. At least you put a lot of thought into your prediction. Similar to you, I think it's going to be a competitive game. I'm going out on a limb and saying it won't be quite the blowout that last year was. I know that's a very large limb to climb on, but I'm confident that I can do it. But I think we're going to see the first repeat champions since the Patriots repeated as champions. I think it's going to be a little bigger margin than you had. I also had the Seahawks scoring 31, though. I had it going 31-20. I think the Seattle defense is going to rise up. Like you said, I think it's going to be a little tighter in the first half. Teams feeling each other out. Seattle's going to get a little lead going into the half. They're going to come out. Russell Wilson's going to run some of that read option. They're going to make a couple big plays. The defense is continually going to shut down Tom Brady, making life miserable for Amendola, for Edelman. When they catch it, they're going to get tattooed. Gronk will probably have a good game. Blunt will do okay, but at the end of the day, I think 31-20, Seahawks win. And I'm certain you're right. Whether he intercepts Brady or not, Richard Sherman at some point will probably try and find a camera after they win and say, "You mad, bro?" So, good for us. We both predicted Seattle, so everyone listening, please go bet on the Patriots because that's most likely what's going to happen.
We'll see. I just hope we get a game. Obviously, last year's game was, no matter who you were cheering for, I guess if you're a diehard Seahawks fan, you were still happy to see them pouring it on at the end. But if you were a neutral fan or a Broncos fan or just someone who wanted a good game, it was ugly early. And so hopefully we at least get a game well into the fourth quarter this year.
Yeah, at least have a game that's not decided by the second half that you're still questioning is the game going to turn on the next play. But yes, let's hope we get a little better game. Although if there is a blowout, I don't mind it being Seattle blowing New England out.
Yeah, I'd be perfectly okay with that.
All right, well that's it, sports fans, for this week. So why don't you tune back in next week and see how we did with our prop bets, how we did with our awards predictions, and obviously how we did with our Super Bowl predictions. In the meantime, why don't you go out and check out SteelScorpionSports.com, a better species of fantasy football. You can navigate around our site, check out the blogs page, read about our rules and our leagues, and then set aside some time so that you can join one of our leagues next year. Because definitely, after you read about it, I think you'll agree we're a better species of fantasy football. Again, that's SteelScorpionSports.com.
And Jeff, we do have actually one final thing. We've been teasing this for a week or two now. We have to give it to people, okay? This is my strategy for the Super Bowl squares.
I was trying to avoid going over that, but all right, here we go. The Super Bowl squares patented strategy by Mark Heflin. Shoot.
Right, here it is. So obviously you have to buy squares before you know what the numbers are. At least if the person at your school party is doing things correctly. Otherwise, it's very easy to buy the 7s and 3s, and the 0s are good too. But here's the thing: what are the 3 numbers you would hate the least? Like if you saw them at first, I don't want that. I don't want a 5 and a 2. So the 3 worst numbers that you can possibly get are 2, 5, and 8. Okay, those are the ones that are least likely to hit. So, and actually 8 isn't, that's probably the 3rd least, but especially 2 and 5. So my strategy is, you go and you look, 2 down and 2 over. So you buy the 2, 2 square. Then you go over, you go 5 down and 5 over. You buy the 5, 5 square. And then you also buy the 8, 8 square. Now, that way, you're kind of like reverse jinxing yourself. When you buy the 2, 2, the 5, 5, and 8, 8 squares, they are, whether you know it or not, this is a fact, they are less likely to be drawn as 2, 5s or 8s. So, there it is. That is the winning strategy. Now, if you buy those 3 squares, those are 3 squares out of 100. So odds would say you have a 3% chance of winning. I'm telling you right now, you buy those 2 squares, you have at least a 3.5% chance. And what more can you ask for than a better chance than the odds would say?
I don't know where to go with that, Mark. So thank you for your great strategy on picking the randomly assigned numbered squares for the pool. Very, very good thought into that. Thank you.
Hey, you try it and thank me later.
I will try it and most likely not be thanking you later. When I end up with 8 and 2 in my boxes, I will know where to find you.
Yeah.
All right, well, that does wrap up this week's podcast. Anything you need to add before we sign off, Mark?
I don't know how I could top what I just said. So.
I don't know how anyone could top what you just said. So with that, I'm going to sign off from San Diego. This is Jeff Miller.
Signing off from San Jose, this is Mark Kessler.
We'll talk to you next week, sports fans.